Hello everyone and welcome back to the Story Sleeper. Here on this channel I share fairy tales to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we start, I would like to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Tonight, you'll discover not just one, but several enchanting retellings of the beloved tale of Little Red Riding Hood. Each one a soothing voyage filled with magic, mystery, and gentle wonder. Now, get comfortable and relax. At the foot of a heavily forested mountain sat a village, its quaint homes nestled together in a quiet hush. The mountain stood tall above them, its peaks capped with snow year-round. The villagers lived peaceful, simple lives, farming, tending to their animals, and finding joy in the everyday. But few ever ventured into the thick forest that cradled the town, lush with vegetation and laced with sparkling brooks and streams. Though the forest was home to many wild animals, none ever troubled the villagers. It was as though a silent agreement existed between them, each respecting the other's space. In this beautiful mountainside village lived a very special girl. She lived with her parents and was known to everyone as Little Red. The nickname came from her favorite piece of clothing, a bright red cloak, just a bit too big for her. She could often be seen running errands or visiting friends, the red cloak billowing softly behind her. The wool brushed gently against her skin, reminding her of beloved stuffed bears and soft dolls. When she wore it, she felt safe, as if the cloak itself watched over her. When autumn arrived and snow blanketed the peaks more deeply, she would pull the hood over her head and roam the village and forest alike, fearless and warm. It made her feel invisible, like a warrior wrapped in courage and comfort. But the cloak's real magic came from who had given it to her beloved Granny. Granny was Little Red's favorite person in the world. She lived far from the village in a cozy little cottage deep within the forest. She had built it herself with help from a local woodcutter and decorated it with joy. The cottage, painted a cheerful pink, was surrounded by flowers, lilacs and tulips, roses and daisies, and an herb garden full of rosemary, witch hazel, turmeric, and aloe. Behind the house stretched a thriving vegetable patch with pumpkins, squash, cauliflower, and more. Not far from the garden, a stream wound through the forest, its clear water singing as it ran over smooth rocks. Granny loved to sit in her backyard, knitting or preparing vegetables, as birds sang from the trees and the stream murmured in the background. Every day, she nurtured the earth around her, digging and planting, coaxing life from the soil. Little Red cherished the afternoons spent with Granny among the flowers, learning about plants and soaking in the warmth of her stories. It had been a few weeks since her last visit, and her heart leapt with excitement when her mother asked her to deliver a fresh batch of homemade bread. After breakfast, the kitchen filled with the smell of toasty loaves and sweet tea cakes. Little Red closed her eyes, breathing in the comforting aroma as her mother packed a basket lined with a red and white checkered cloth. There were round loaves sprinkled with sesame, multigrain breads, and fragrant pastries tucked inside with care. With the basket ready, there was only one thing left to do. She slipped on her red cloak, hugged her mother tightly, and stepped out into the morning light. The path to Granny's cottage lay through the forest. One Little Red knew well, though few others in the village dared to travel it. As she entered the woods, the trees stood tall on either side. First came the birches, and then, as she climbed the rising path, pines and aromatic spruce joined the scenery, casting long shadows on the mossy ground. Sunlight streamed down in golden shafts between the branches. She skipped through them, her cloak trailing behind her like a banner. The forest welcomed her, the trees swaying gently as though greeting an old friend. Near the cottage, a thin ribbon of smoke curled into the sky. The scent of something savory drifted on the breeze. Granny was cooking. With her heart beating faster, Little Red hurried up the path through the cheerful garden just as Granny opened the door. She wore her favorite apron, the same crimson shade as Little Red's cloak, and smiled warmly as her granddaughter ran into her arms. But something inside the cottage caught the girl's attention. Movement by the fireplace. Peeking inside, her eyes widened. There, curled in front of the fire, lay a huge, shaggy, gray wolf, fast asleep. Its thick fur shimmered in the firelight. Its tail flicked back and forth as though chasing dreams of rabbits or squirrels. She turned to Granny, stunned, but Granny only grinned. Then, with a mysterious smile, Granny invited her inside. Was this a joke? Perhaps it was just a large dog, but as she stepped cautiously closer, still holding Granny's hand, she realized this was definitely a wolf. A magnificent, enormous creature with ears twitching in its sleep and white-tipped fur glowing gold in the hearthlight. Granny motioned for her to sit, and once they were both settled, she began to tell the story. A few days ago, she had been tending her pumpkins when she heard howling near the stream. Curious and a little concerned, she followed the sound. There, near the water, lay a wolf with an injured leg. Soon after, the woodcutter happened by. Together, they gently carried the creature back to the cottage. Granny gathered herbs, turmeric, aloe, witch hazel, and bound the wound with care. Then, she left food and water beside him, whispered a wish for healing, and went back inside. That night, just as she was finishing dinner, she heard scratching at the back door, and when she opened it, there he was, the wolf, waiting patiently. Granny let him in. He lay down by the fire and had stayed ever since, gentle and calm. He followed her around the house and even helped her in the garden, digging up weeds by her side. Little Red listened, amazed. This wasn't the story she expected. She looked at the sleeping wolf, still unsure. "What big paws he has," she whispered. "All the better to hug you with, my dear," Granny chuckled. "What big eyes. All the better to see you with," Granny replied again, patting the couch. At that moment, the wolf stirred and stood. His enormous frame seemed to fill the room, yet he moved with graceful ease. His dark eyes met Little Red's, warm, intelligent, kind. He nudged Granny's hand, and she scratched behind his ears. Slowly, gently, he stepped toward the girl, sniffing the air between them. She held still, then She reached out, carefully touching the soft fur on his head. The wolf wagged his tail, encouraging her. It was softer than she imagined, like velvet, and in that moment, her fear melted away. Her stomach growled, reminding her of the feast she had forgotten. Granny smiled knowingly and ladled out a warm bowl of pumpkin soup, her favorite. Together, they sat at the table, breaking bread and sharing stories. The soup was creamy and nutty, spiced with love. The wolf slept nearby, content by the fire. After dinner, they cleaned up and sank into the cozy cushions of Granny's couch. The wolf climbed up beside them, his great tail curling around them like a blanket. Little Red lay her head in Granny's lap, her hand resting gently on the wolf's back. His steady breathing and the warmth of Granny's voice lulled her toward sleep. Outside, the wind rustled gently through the trees. Inside, the fire crackled, and all was well. As her eyes closed, Little Red dreamed of running through the forest with her new friend, the great gray wolf, laughing and playing hide and seek among the trees. And in that dream, she felt brave, she felt loved, and she felt perfectly safe. It was a dream so soft and golden, it might just have been a fairy tale. Once, in a land where the stars hung low over the treetops and the night hummed like a lullaby, there lived a girl who wore a hood the color of dusk-touched roses. They called her Little Red Riding Hood, not because anyone remembered her true name, but because the name felt as ancient and familiar as the forest she walked through each day. Her mother lived at the edge of the whispering forest, in a cottage with moss growing between its stones and wildflowers blooming in the windowsills. It was a quiet life, touched by birdsong and the rustle of leaves, and in every corner of their home there was a sense of stillness, as though time itself had curled up like a cat in the sun. Little Red, as her mother called her, was a child of unusual calm. She spoke rarely, but listened deeply. When she wandered beyond the garden gate, the forest greeted her with rustling branches and murmured greetings in the wind. She walked slowly, noticing each pebble, each curl of moss, each sleeping mushroom beneath the roots. Her hood, lovingly stitched by her grandmother long ago, was no ordinary garment. Woven of thread dyed in moonlight and star petals, it shimmered gently when the forest light kissed it. Some said it had been blessed by the old spirits of the woods. Others whispered that it kept her safe, drawing the watchful eyes of the ancient trees and the old wind that knew every leaf and feather. One morning, as the mist lifted softly from the ground, Red's mother stood by the kitchen window with a basket of fresh bread and warm pear preserves. "Your grandmother sent word," she said, her voice wrapped in the quiet hush of early day. "She isn't feeling quite herself, perhaps just a touch of weariness from the cold moon. Would you bring this basket to her?" Red nodded. Her eyes held no fear, only a gentle readiness. It was a familiar path, though the forest shifted often. The trees liked to rearrange themselves, especially for those who weren't paying attention. But Red always walked with her eyes open and her ears alert, her mind soft like velvet. "Go by the old stream," her mother added, "the one with the stepping stones that look like sleeping turtles. Avoid the northern bend. It feels restless there lately." Red kissed her mother's cheek and took the basket, covering it with a cloth sewn with little moons and stars. The scent of the bread mingled with the cool morning air as she stepped into the forest. The trees greeted her with a gentle hush, as if leaning down to say, "She is coming." She walked slowly, deliberately. The path was soft with pine needles and lit in golden patches where sunlight slipped through. Birds trilled above her. A squirrel paused to watch her pass, nose twitching somewhere in the canopy. A crow cawed once and then fell silent. Red paused often, not because she was tired, but because the forest asked her to listen. The whisper of leaves, the way the light pooled around a ring of mushrooms, the soft sigh of the breeze as it slipped past her cheeks like a memory. She reached the stream and stepped carefully on the turtle-shaped stones. The water whispered stories beneath her feet. She had heard them before, tales of lovers who turned into trees, of wolves who had forgotten their names, of stars that fell and became seeds. Red liked stories. They didn't need to be told out loud. The forest told them in its own way. A little way beyond the stream, where the trees grew older and their roots knotted like sleeping serpents, Red paused again. There was a stillness here, different than before, the kind that made the birds quiet and the squirrels stay hidden. She touched the bark of an old elm. "Are you sleeping?" she asked softly. Her voice barely disturbed the silence. A breeze stirred, lifting the edge of her hood. "Not sleeping," it seemed to say. Waiting, she continued on, deeper now. The air felt cooler, but not unfriendly, as though the forest held its breath in wonder. Then came the sound, a crunch, a twig, the shift of something large and silent, moving where there had been nothing a moment before. Red stopped, her hands were still, her breath slow. From the shadows beneath a hawthorn bush stepped a creature of grays and silvers. A wolf, but not a beast of snarls or sharp teeth. This wolf was old, with fur that shimmered like frost and eyes the color of winter skies. He did not bare his teeth, he bowed his head low. "You wear the moon's thread," he said. His voice was deep and tired. "I have not seen one like you for many seasons." Red tilted her head. "I am only visiting my grandmother." The wolf nodded slowly. "She lives beyond the elder grove, but the forest shifts. You must walk carefully." Red studied him. There was no fear in her gaze. "Will you walk with me?" The wolf seemed surprised. "You are not afraid of wolves?" "I am not afraid of the forest," she said simply. For a long moment, they looked at each other. Then the wolf turned, stepping lightly ahead, his paws silent on the path. They walked together in silence, the girl in red and the wolf in silver, beneath a canopy of light-dappled leaves. And the forest, ancient and watching, whispered their names like a song. The forest deepened as they walked. It was not that the trees grew taller, though they did, but rather the quiet grew wider. Even the wind, which had once drifted like soft breath between branches, now seemed to tiptoe from leaf to leaf. Little Red walked with ease, the basket steady on her arm, the red hood soft around her face. The wolf moved beside her with the grace of long memory. His paws left no prints in the moss, as though he belonged more to the past than the present. "Have you lived here long?" she asked after a time, her voice no louder than birdsong. "A very long time," said the wolf. "Long enough to forget what the world beyond the trees sounds like, long enough to remember the songs the forest used to sing when the stars were still young." Red nodded. "You sound lonely." The wolf blinked slowly. "Perhaps I am, but not now." They passed beneath an arch of ivy-draped stone, what once may have been a gate, now nearly forgotten, claimed by roots and years. On the other side, the trees gave way to a grove. It was quiet here, too quiet. No birds, no rustling, only the low hum of time holding its breath. "This is the grove of forgotten names," the wolf said. His voice softened. "Once, people came here to remember. Now, they come only by accident or by invitation." Red stepped forward. Her feet made no sound. Around her, the air shimmered faintly, as though filled with threads of invisible silk. She saw shapes among the trees, not people, but impressions, ghosts of memories, a child reaching for a kite, a woman weaving by candlelight, a man humming as he carved a flute, all of them silent, fading as she looked, like breath on a mirror. "These are not spirits," said the wolf, as if hearing her thoughts. They are the imprints of lives once lived. This grove remembers what others forget. Red sat at the base of a willow tree, the long leaves brushing her shoulders like a shawl. "My grandmother remembers a great deal," she said, "but she forgets things too. Sometimes she calls me by my mother's name. Sometimes she talks to the moon as if it were her sister." "Perhaps it is," said the wolf, "or once was." Red smiled faintly. "Do you have a name?" The wolf was silent for a moment. "I did," he said at last, "but I laid it down long ago in this very grove. Names have power, and sometimes letting go is a kind of peace." "Would you like a new one?" Red asked gently. The wolf looked at her. There was something ancient in his eyes, something tired, only if it is whispered by someone who listens. She leaned close, touched his fur, and said so softly that even the leaves had to lean in to hear, "I will call you Lumen." The wolf closed his eyes. "That is a kind name." They stayed a while in the grove, letting the stillness settle around them like fog. No one rushed. The moment stretched like a soft evening, where nothing had to be done except breathe. When they rose to leave, the shadows were longer, and the path ahead looked unfamiliar. "This way," said Lumen. "You're sure?" "No," he said, "but sometimes the way finds you when you're not looking too hard." Red nodded. She trusted the forest. As they walked on, the path narrowed into a ribbon of golden dirt, bordered by lavender and soft moss. Fireflies danced in the air, even though the sun had not yet set. One landed gently on the edge of her basket and blinked twice before lifting away. Soon, they came to a fork in the trail. One path curved downward into mist and stone. The other rose gently toward a ridge of light. "Which way?" she asked. Lumen hesitated. "The lower path is quicker, but it passes near the hollow tree. It's not always kind. And the other? Longer, but safer, and it will show you something you may need to see." Red looked at both paths. She listened, not just with her ears, but with her chest, her breath, the way the ground felt beneath her feet. "This way," she said, and took the higher path. They walked on, the trail winding like a stream of light. Along the way, she asked Lumen more questions. "Did you always live alone?" "No, there were others, but wolves do not always grow old together. Some become shadows, some become wind, some forget they were ever wolves at all. Do you remember your family?" "I remember the way my sister howled when the moon was full. It sounded like a story being sung backward." "And your mother?" "She taught me to sit still enough to hear mushrooms grow." Red smiled. "I would have liked her. She would have liked you." Twilight arrived slowly, like a blanket being pulled gently over the sky. The sun bowed low. The first stars peeked through. Ahead, the trees parted to reveal a ridge overlooking the valley. Red stepped to the edge and looked out. Below, under a veil of silver light, was her grandmother's cottage, small and snug, with smoke curling from the chimney. It looked almost like a memory. "She's close," Red whispered. "Yes," said Lumen, "but not yet. There is one more place you must pass." Red turned to him. "Will you come all the way with me?" "If you wish." "I do." So together, the girl in red and the silver-furred wolf walked on toward the place where dusk becomes night and stories begin to bend like branches toward their ending. The path wound downward now, narrowing between ancient oaks whose roots curled like sleeping serpents beneath the soil. The air grew cooler, thick with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The forest here seemed to hold its breath. Red walked slowly, her fingers brushing the rough bark of the trees as if to steady herself. Lumen moved silently beside her, his eyes alert in the growing twilight. Ahead stood the hollow tree, a towering sentinel hollowed out by time and shadow. Its bark was worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The great hollow yawned like a mouth in the side of the trunk, dark and deep. "This is where many lose their way," Lumen whispered. "The tree does not want visitors. It remembers old wounds and old fears." Red felt a chill, but met the tree's gaze steadily. "I am not afraid," she said quietly. Lumen nodded. "Then we shall pass." As they approached, the hollow seemed to breathe, a low wind sighing through its empty center. Soft voices whispered there, echoes of forgotten stories and lost dreams. Red listened carefully. Among the murmurs, she heard a faint song, a lullaby her grandmother had once hummed, words long forgotten but familiar in their melody. She stepped forward and placed her hand inside the hollow. The darkness was cool but not empty. It felt alive, like a pulse, slow and steady. A spark of light flickered deep within. "Do you see it?" Lumen asked. Red nodded. The light grew, filling the hollow with a soft golden glow. It stretched upward, spilling like liquid warmth into the forest dusk. The voices quieted, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the evening song of crickets. "You carry light within you, little Red," said Lumen. "It is not just your hood that shines, but your heart. The forest has always watched for you." Red smiled, her fear melting like mist in morning sun. "Thank you," she whispered. They stepped away from the hollow tree, the path opening into a glade bathed in moonlight. Fireflies gathered there like floating stars, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. At the center stood her grandmother's cottage, warm and welcoming, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. Red's heart swelled with comfort and joy. Together, they approached the door. Inside, the soft glow of candlelight flickered over familiar faces and gentle smiles. The forest's ancient song carried softly in the night air, weaving together all the threads of this quiet, magical journey. The door to the cottage creaked open, revealing the soft golden light spilling out into the cool night. Little Red stepped inside, the scent of herbs and fresh bread wrapping around her like a gentle hug. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Her grandmother sat by the window, a shawl draped over her shoulders and a knitting needle gently clicking between her fingers. She looked up with a smile as Red entered, her eyes sparkling with quiet joy. "My dear," she said softly, "you have come at just the right time." Red set down her basket on the worn wooden table, its cloth still fluttering softly from the journey. She took off her red hood and folded it carefully, the familiar weight now a comfort rather than a burden. Lumen, the silver wolf, padded quietly behind her and settled near the hearth, his deep breaths syncing with the rhythm of the fire. Grandmother reached out and placed a wrinkled hand on Red's. "Tell me, child, what did the forest whisper to you on your way here?" Red smiled, her voice calm and steady. "It told me to listen, to be patient, and that the path isn't always straight, that sometimes the journey itself is the lesson." The old woman nodded, her eyes misty with understanding. "The forest is wise, and so are you." They shared a meal of hearty pumpkin soup and fresh bread, the warmth of the food mirrored by the warmth of their company. Outside, the moon cast a silver glow over the trees, and the soft rustling of leaves sang a lullaby through the open window. After supper, Red and her grandmother sat by the fire, and the wolf lay quietly at their feet. The room was filled with a peaceful stillness, a quiet sanctuary from the world beyond. As Red's eyelids grew heavy, her grandmother's voice softened to a gentle murmur. "The forest will watch over you, my dear, and so will I, from near or far." Red smiled, feeling the soft cloak of safety wrapping around her heart. And as the fire flickered low, she drifted into dreams filled with moonlight, whispering trees, and the silver wolf's gentle watch. The night deepened, wrapping the cottage in a velvet cloak dotted with twinkling stars. Outside, the forest sighed softly, its breath mingling with the cool night air. Inside, Little Red lay curled beneath a quilt, the softness of her grandmother's home surrounding her like a gentle embrace. Her red hood was folded carefully on the bedside chair, a quiet reminder of the day's journey and the mysteries it had unfolded. Near the window, moonlight spilled across the wooden floor, painting silver patterns that shifted with the whisper of leaves. Lumen, the silver wolf, rested just beyond the doorway, his breathing slow and steady, a rhythmic heartbeat in the stillness. As sleep began to gather around Red like a soft fog, the edges of the room blurred and softened. The world shifted, and she found herself walking again beneath the stars. But this time, the forest was transformed. The trees shimmered with silvery light. Flowers glowed softly in the dark. The air hummed with the songs of ancient spirits, and the sky was a vast canvas of swirling colors, as if the northern lights had come to visit. Red felt weightless, her steps light upon the mossy ground. She moved with ease, the red cloak flowing behind her like a ribbon of flame amid the quiet. She heard laughter, soft and musical, carried onto the breeze. Shapes moved just beyond sight, playful and gentle. The silver wolf appeared by her side, his eyes shining like stars. "This is the forest of dreams," he said quietly, "where wishes take flight and fears dissolve." Together, they wandered through the dreamscape, where time was soft and the heart could speak freely. Red saw visions of her grandmother, younger and vibrant, tending her garden with hands full of blossoms. She saw the faces of the forest creatures, watching kindly from shadows and branches. She heard the songs of the stars, stories told without words. In this place, Red felt whole, connected to the past, present, and all that would come. As dawn's first light touched the edges of the sky, the dream began to fade like morning mist. The forest whispered a final lullaby, and Red awoke with a peaceful sigh. The quilt was warm, the room bathed in gentle light. She opened her eyes to see her grandmother smiling, Lumen resting close by, and the promise of a new day waiting softly beyond the window. Morning light spilled softly through the cottage window, painting the room in hues of gold and amber. Little Red stirred beneath the warm quilt, her eyes fluttering open to the gentle sounds of the waking forest beyond the glass. Her grandmother was already bustling quietly in the kitchen, the comforting aroma of fresh bread and simmering herbs filling the air. Lumen, the silver wolf, lay peacefully by the hearth, his fur shimmering faintly in the morning glow. Red rose slowly, stretching and pulling her beloved red cloak around her shoulders. It felt lighter somehow, as if the forest's whispered blessings had settled into the threads. Over breakfast, they spoke quietly about the day ahead. Red's heart was full, filled with the peace of the forest, the warmth of home, and the steady, watchful presence of her new friend. When it was time to leave, Red felt no sadness. The path back through the whispering forest was familiar, yet somehow changed, alive with the promise of many more stories yet to come. Lumen walked beside her as they followed the winding trail, the trees bowing gently as if to bless her passage. The sun filtered through the leaves in soft beams, warming her cheeks and casting playful shadows on the ground. Birds sang their morning songs, welcoming her as a friend. With each step, Little Red felt the quiet strength of the forest within her, a calm courage that would guide her wherever she might wander. As she emerged from the trees and caught sight of her own village nestled below the mountain, she smiled softly, knowing that the magic of the forest would always be with her. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon and stars, the girl in the red cloak walked home, forever part of the whispering woods, forever carrying their light in her heart. At the edge of a quiet village, where the wooden cottages leaned gently toward one another as if sharing secrets, there lived a woman who wore a cloak the color of deep autumn leaves, glowing softly beneath the fading light. This cloak was a gift from her grandmother, woven with threads of memory and care, and it wrapped around her like a second skin, warm and familiar. Her name was not often spoken aloud. Most simply called her Red, after the vivid cloak she wore. But Red was more than a color or a name. She was a keeper of stories, a guardian of gentle paths, a daughter of both village and forest. Each morning, as dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Red prepared for her journey. Her grandmother, who lived in a small cottage nestled deep within the ancient woods, had sent word she needed fresh bread, warm soup, and the comfort of a visitor's smile. Red welcomed these trips, for they gave her time to walk beneath the trees, to breathe in the cool, fragrant air, and to listen. The forest was alive with quiet sounds, the rustle of leaves, the soft drip of morning dew, the distant call of a lone bird awakening. It was a place that held its own rhythm, a slow, steady pulse that invited calm and reflection. Red gathered her basket carefully, filling it with the gifts her mother had prepared: freshly baked rye bread, a jar of honey, herbs for tea, and a small bundle of lavender tied with a satin ribbon. She folded her cloak tightly about her shoulders and stepped outside, the chill of morning brushing her cheeks like a gentle breath. Her path led away from the village and into the embrace of the trees. The trail was soft underfoot, carpeted with moss and scattered with fallen leaves that crunched lightly as she passed. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow that danced along the way. As she walked, Red felt the familiar presence of the forest around her, the ancient oaks standing tall like silent sentinels, the slender birches whispering secrets in the breeze, the low ferns brushing against her skirt. She moved slowly, savoring each step, each scent, each sound. Farther in, the air grew cooler and thicker with the scent of pine and earth. The quiet was deeper here, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Red's fingers brushed the rough bark of a nearby tree, grounding herself in the moment. It was then she noticed movement, a shimmer between the trunks, a flicker of silver and gray. She paused, steadying her breath, and from the shadows stepped a figure, both graceful and wild, a wolf larger than any she had ever seen, with fur that gleamed like moonlight on water and eyes deep and knowing. The wolf regarded her with calm intelligence, neither threat nor fear in its gaze. Red felt no urge to run, only a peaceful recognition, as if the creature was an old friend, a guardian of the woods who had been watching over her all along. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another, two beings bound by the quiet magic of the forest. Then, without a sound, the wolf turned and began to walk along the path ahead, pausing to look back, inviting her to follow. Red smiled softly and adjusted her cloak, her heart steady and calm. Together, they moved deeper into the woods, beneath the watchful eyes of ancient trees, into the timeless dance of light and shadow. The wolf's footsteps were soft and steady, the only sound beside the gentle whisper of leaves stirred by the afternoon breeze. Red followed at a respectful distance, her eyes tracing the way through the thickening woods. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of moss and wildflowers, a natural perfume that settled gently around them. The forest seemed to lean in closer as they traveled, the branches above weaving a delicate lattice through which dappled sunlight fell like scattered gold. Every so often, a bird's song rippled through the quiet, a melody that seemed meant only for those who truly listened. Red's thoughts drifted slowly, like leaves floating on a calm stream. She remembered her grandmother's words, spoken softly by the fire during one of her last visits. The forest is alive, Red. It listens, it watches, and it holds stories older than any of us. When you walk beneath the trees, you are part of those stories now. With each step, Red felt herself growing more deeply connected to the forest's ancient rhythm. The cloak around her shoulders warmed her against the coolness, a comforting weight that reminded her she was never truly alone. As the path wound upward, the trees began to thin, revealing glimpses of the valley below, rolling hills that glowed faintly in the evening light, their soft contours bathed in gentle hues of lavender and rose. The air grew crisper, tinged with the scent of pine and earth, freshly kissed by evening dew. At the edge of a small clearing, the wolf paused and turned his head toward her, eyes gleaming with quiet understanding. Red smiled, stepping into the open space where the fading sunlight bathed the grass in a warm, golden glow. Here, the world felt suspended between day and night, a moment of perfect stillness. Red lowered her basket carefully, reaching inside to pull out a small flask of tea her grandmother had prepared, chamomile and mint, steeped gently to soothe and calm. She took a slow sip, savoring the warmth spreading through her chest, grounding her in this peaceful place. The wolf settled beside her, his presence calm and steady, a quiet guardian in the fading light. Red reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing the soft fur along his neck. He leaned in to her touch, eyes closing briefly, as if in quiet gratitude. "Thank you for walking with me," she whispered. The forest seemed to breathe around them, the gentle rustle of leaves blending with the distant call of an owl awakening to the night. Shadows lengthened, and stars began to peek through the darkening sky, twinkling softly like ancient lanterns hung just beyond reach. Red wrapped her cloak more tightly around her, feeling the gentle pulse of the woods beneath her feet and the steady heartbeat of the wolf at her side. In this moment, the forest was not a place of fear or unknown danger, but a sanctuary, a realm of quiet light and gentle strength. When it was time to rise, the wolf stood gracefully and gave a soft breath, a sound like the sigh of the wind through the trees. Red gathered her things, her spirit calm and steady, ready to continue the journey deeper into the forest where her grandmother awaited. Together, they stepped back onto the winding path, the slow rhythm of their footsteps weaving into the endless song of the woods, a story of trust, of respect, and of the quiet power that comes from walking with open eyes and a gentle heart. As night deepened and the stars twinkled through the cottage's small windows, Red and her grandmother sat together by the hearth, the wolf resting peacefully at their feet. The fire's gentle crackle filled the room, casting flickering shadows that danced along the timbered walls. Grandmother's voice was soft and steady, weaving tales of the forest's ancient magic and the spirits that dwelled within the trees. She spoke of the old oak, whose roots reached to the heart of the earth, and of the whispering brook that carried the voices of those who had come before. Red listened with quiet awe, her fingers tracing the delicate embroidery on her crimson cloak, a tapestry of memories and stories stitched into every thread. The forest was not just a place to walk through, it was a living storybook filled with lessons and wonders. The woods are patient, her grandmother said. They watch and wait for those who will listen. They teach us to be gentle, to respect the balance of life, and to find peace within ourselves. Outside, the wind hummed softly, a lullaby carried from leaf to leaf. Red felt the weight of the day's journey settle into a calm contentment. Here, surrounded by warmth and wisdom, she understood the deeper meaning of the path she walked. The wolf lifted his head, eyes gleaming in the firelight, as if to remind them that the forest's guardians were always near, watching with silent vigilance. Red reached out and stroked the wolf's fur, feeling the quiet strength beneath her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for guiding me." Her grandmother smiled, her eyes full of quiet knowing. "You are never truly alone, child. The forest, the creatures, the stories, they all walk with you." As the night wore on, Red's eyelids grew heavy, and she leaned against her grandmother, the firelight warm against her skin. The world beyond the cottage softened into dreams, and the forest's gentle song carried her into restful sleep. The first light of dawn slipped softly through the cottage window, painting the room in hues of pale gold and gentle rose. The forest outside stirred with the slow awakening of birdsong and the delicate rustle of leaves kissed by morning dew. Red awoke to the peaceful murmur of the woods, the scent of pine and fresh earth filling the air. Her crimson cloak lay folded neatly beside her, still carrying the faint warmth of the night's embrace. Stretching gently, she rose and found her grandmother already tending to the small garden just outside the door. The older woman's hands moved with practiced care, brushing soil around young shoots and whispering quiet encouragement to the growing plants. The wolf lay nearby, basking in the gentle light, his silver fur glowing softly in the morning sun. Red stepped outside, the cool morning air wrapping around her like a balm. The forest greeted her anew, its shadows retreating before the promise of the day. Together, Red and her grandmother moved through the garden, sharing the simple joy of nurturing life, the touch of leaves, the scent of herbs, the miracle of growth unfolding beneath their fingers. They spoke little, their companionship a quiet conversation of smiles and shared glances. The wolf followed at a calm pace, a steadfast presence beside them. As the sun climbed higher, Red felt a renewed sense of belonging, a deep connection to the earth beneath her feet, the sky above, and the ancient woods that cradled them. Before she departed, her grandmother pressed a small bundle into her hands, freshly baked bread wrapped in a linen cloth, and a sprig of rosemary for protection and remembrance. "Walk carefully," her grandmother said softly. "The forest watches still, but it welcomes those who move with respect. Red nodded, donning her crimson cloak once more. With the wolf at her side, she stepped onto the path that would lead her home, a path now illuminated not just by the morning light, but by the quiet strength of the forest's embrace. With the morning sun warming her back, Red adjusted the hood of her crimson cloak and began the gentle journey back through the forest. The path beneath her feet was soft with moss and fallen leaves, each step releasing the subtle scent of earth and pine. The wolf walked quietly beside her, a silent guardian through the shifting light and shadow of the trees. Together, they moved with a calm grace, attuned to the rhythms of the woods, the rustling branches, the distant call of a morning bird, the trickle of a hidden stream. Red's thoughts drifted like the gentle breeze that played through the leaves. She carried with her the warmth of her grandmother's cottage, the scent of fresh bread, and the quiet lessons learned beneath the ancient pines. The forest no longer felt mysterious or unknown. It was a place of peace, a living presence that welcomed her with open arms. Every tree seemed to nod in greeting, every flower to lean toward her path. As she walked, the sun climbed higher, sending dappled light across the forest floor. Shadows flickered and shifted, telling stories of day and night, growth and rest, endings and beginnings. Near the edge of the woods, where the trees gave way to the familiar fields of the village, Red paused. She looked back into the forest's depths, feeling a deep gratitude for its protection and the quiet strength it had shared. The wolf lingered at the boundary, his silver fur shining in the sunlight, before turning back toward the shadowed trees. Red smiled softly, knowing their paths would cross again whenever the forest called. With a last breath of the cool, pine-scented air, she stepped from the woods and onto the familiar earth of her village. The gentle hum of life welcomed her home, the distant laughter of children, the soft murmur of the river, the comforting sight of cottages nestled among the hills. Red carried with her the forest's calm, the stories it held, and the strength of the crimson cloak that wrapped her in warmth and light. And as the day unfolded, she knew that the path beneath the moon would always be there, a gentle song whispered among the trees waiting for her return. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the leaves, the little girl turned to her mother and said, "Mother, there are so many people calling me Little Red Riding Hood that I can't even remember my own name." Her mother smiled gently and replied, "Oh, darling, when you were just a baby, I always dressed you in the red hood your grandmother made for you. You looked so beautiful in it that everyone started calling you Little Red Riding Hood. Every year since then, your grandmother has sewn you a new one, always the same bright red, just like the color of your sweet little mouth." The little girl nodded. "The last time I visited Grandma, she said my new hood was almost ready." Then her mother said, "Little Red Riding Hood, I just baked a fresh apple pie. Will you take it to your grandmother's house?" The girl nodded, eager as ever, but her mother paused with worry. "Oh, but wait, I'm afraid you might get distracted playing in the woods and run into the big bad wolf. He is a cunning, awful creature who would do anything to make you his dinner." Little Red Riding Hood was lovely, brave, and more than a little stubborn. She laughed and answered, "Don't worry, Mother. I know the safe path, the one watched by the hunter. The wolf never dares go there. I'll be just fine." Her mother sighed but let her go, placing the pie carefully in a basket. "Just remember," she said, "never play with the wolf." But Little Red Riding Hood had plans of her own. She wanted to explore the deeper parts of the forest. With a wave to her mother, she set off with her basket swinging and a bright smile on her face. Unseen by her mother, the trees observed her departure. Had the mother seen what they saw, she would have run after her daughter and kept her close. Among the many trees stood a gray pine, so old that he had not sung his birthday song in 1,000 years. He whispered to a young pine beside him, "Look, little pine, there goes Little Red Riding Hood, ignoring her mother's warning. She's chosen the wrong path, the dangerous one." Little Pine trembled, but Old Pine, that part of the forest, is where the big bad wolf lives, and they say he hasn't eaten in months. "We must try to warn her," said Old Pine. "Let's move our branches with all our strength. Perhaps she will listen." They rustled and swayed, calling out in the only language trees knew, and for a moment the girl heard them. She froze, thinking the sound was the wolf himself, but then shook her head. "The wolf doesn't scare me," she muttered. "I'm not afraid of any big bad wolf." Instead of turning back, she began to pick colorful flowers to decorate the basket for her grandmother. Unbeknownst to her, claws moved quietly through the bushes nearby, and a pair of red eyes watched her carefully. Moments later, the inevitable happened. Little Red Riding Hood found herself face to face with the big bad wolf. "Hello, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf with a sly smile. "I'm glad you came into the forest. I've been waiting to meet you." She looked at him, surprised. "They've told me terrible things about you," she said, "but you seem very friendly." The wolf grinned wider. "Come with me, Little Red Riding Hood. I'll show you just how kind I can be." "That sounds wonderful," she replied, "but I really must take this pie to my grandmother." "Such a shame," said the wolf, pretending to pout. "Perhaps just a short game, a race, maybe?" The girl hesitated, and the wolf quickly added, "I'll take this path, and you take that one. Let's see who reaches your grandmother's house first." Delighted by the idea, Little Red Riding Hood agreed, not knowing that the wolf had chosen the longer, trickier path for her and the shorter one for himself. The race began, but the wolf, much faster and slyer, arrived at Grandma's house long before the little girl. He hatched a cruel plan. In a soft voice, he called through the door, imitating the girl's tone. "Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood." The old woman, wary, asked, "Who is it? Your voice sounds strange." "It's me, Grandma," the wolf insisted. "Please open up. The woods are full of danger." Still suspicious, the grandmother opened the door just a crack, but that was enough. The wolf lunged and in one bite swallowed her whole. Then he put on her nightgown and glasses, crawled into her bed, and waited, high above. The old pine watched the scene unfold. "Little Pine," he said gravely, "we must do something, now." "I have an idea," said the little pine. "Let's move all our branches, every tree in the forest. Maybe the hunter will see and come." All the trees joined together, swaying and creaking with all their might. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood reached her grandmother's house, proud and breathless from the race. She stepped inside, calling cheerfully, "Grandma, I won! I beat the big bad wolf." But something felt off. "Grandma," she asked, "why do you have such big eyes?" "To see better, my dear," said the wolf, disguising his voice. "And such big ears? To hear you better, child. And such a big nose? To smell you better. And such a big mouth? To eat you better," roared the wolf, throwing off the disguise and leaping from the bed. He pounced, and before she could run, he caught her, but at that very moment, the tree's efforts succeeded. The hunter, passing by, noticed the strange rustling and heard Little Red Riding Hood's terrified screams. He burst through the door and shouted, "Stop right there!" The wolf turned, stunned. His eyes went wide in fear. The hunter raised his rifle, and the wolf's jaw dropped open, just wide enough for the frightened grandmother to leap out, alive and unharmed. The hunter wasted no time. He grabbed the wolf by the ears, dragged him outside, and threw him far into the forest. The beast ran and was never seen again. Little Red Riding Hood, her grandmother, and the hunter all returned safely home. From that day forward, all the trees and animals in the forest remembered the tale, and Little Red Riding Hood sang this song as she skipped home. "I'm not so brave after all, but the forest heard my call. I'll never stray, I'll never roam, for my heart belongs at home." And so the story was told again and again of the girl in the red hood, the wise trees, the brave hunter, and the day the forest itself came alive to save her.